Have you ever gotten an ick from a potential partner or love interest that instantly ended your attraction to them? If so, what happened? First date, I was filling my gas tank and she started going through my phone. I saw her doing it but continued to fill the gas as she read my text messages. I'm a fairly open person with little to hide, but I do value trust and honesty. As soon as the pump clicked off, she put it back in a hurry. I skipped the dinner plans and dropped her home. I didn't address it immediately. She didn't know I was driving towards her house until we got super close, at which point we had maybe 2 minutes left together. In a calm and "I'm disappointed in you" tone, I told her I caught her in the act and that this blatant breach of privacy was a deal breaker for me. I added that she's too old to be acting like an insecure teenager. She was 26, and that she should address this behavior before pursuing serious relationships. She knew she was in the wrong. She stayed quiet until we got back and left the car without a word. If I can't even trust you with my phone, I can't trust you with my future. Still no apology, though. Story 2. I dated a guy who seemed chill but kept talking about social media and how people or exes were scheming against him. I believed him at first until it got to a point where he thought things like a photo someone put up was an indicator that they were getting him back, when these people were literally just doing normal things and posting normal stuff. I think he was schizophrenic, but it was really unsettling. Months later, he rang me out of the blue to ask me about a link between his ex, myself, and a friend. The link was butterflies, and because of this link, he thought we were conspiring against him. Story 3. I went on a date with a seemingly nice guy in my early 20s. It went well, so after dinner, we cuddled in the back seat of his car in a quiet country area listening to music. He gently played with my hand and fingers and gave me a little massage. So relaxing. When he got to my wrist, he looked at it, flipped it around a few times and said in a creepy voice, "It'd be so easy for me to break this right now." It was maybe 2007. I don't remember in detail what happened next. I kind of just played it off like, "Tee-hee, you're so strong," until he took me home. I tried to de-escalate, so I didn't acknowledge that statement too much. I just kept the conversation moving to something else and was careful not to embarrass or upset him. I didn't keep seeing him. I was busy for the next dates he asked me on and then acted as boring as possible until he eventually lost interest in me. We went to college together and we're in ROTC together, so avoiding was kind of hard. He started a relationship with someone else pretty quickly after that. Story 4. Went on a date with a guy I met at a party. He made me prove that I liked Lord of the Rings by answering who said what when he quoted someone. He pulled out a notebook of really poorly drawn anime characters and asked me if he could draw me. He was a lot shorter than me and asked if it bothered me. I said no. Then he said, "Good, I like Amazonian goddesses." He kept trying to put his jewelry onto me despite my protests. He asked what I wanted to order for food, then ignored me and ordered me something else, and got frustrated and didn't eat at all. He referenced being arrested, made me guess what for, and when I refused to guess for not knowing him well enough, he said GBH. He was a trainee doctor and asked if I'd ever broken any bones. When I replied yes, he said that he was going to look up my x-rays. And the icing on the cake, when I wanted to leave, he got my knee-high boots, slipped them onto my feet, zipped them up, and said, "You should always be treated like a goddess, my Morticia Adams." All in one date. Story 5. Yeah, I went on a date with a girl who seemed perfectly fine. She was really nice and made interesting conversation, clearly cared and put effort into the date, but then halfway through she gets a call on her Bluetooth headset, which I hadn't even noticed beneath her hair. I don't know why, but it turned me off so quickly. It was a coworker calling too, and she started discussing some clearly stressful topic, planning a meeting or something. They got to near arguing, and she kept rolling her eyes and sort of half winking at me every time the coworker said something that annoyed her. She ended up saying she had seen a car crash and had to run, which weirdly got me back into her a bit since that's a slick move. But then immediately called another coworker to complain about the first one, and kept winking at me. This was all on a Saturday morning, by the way. One of the weirdest dates I've ever been on. Story 6. Literally every single problem she had was someone else's fault. Even when there was proof it was her fault, she would argue nonstop that it was someone else's. She got in a car wreck and called insurance over and over again to tell them it was the other person's fault. They checked the computer in her car because it saved her speed right before the wreck. It told them everything they needed to know, and she still denied it. Story 7. Oh my god. I went on a date with a guy who loved showing how wealthy he was. We went to a carnival and he was pulling cash out of the ATM. As I stood somewhere close by, he pissed me over and was like, "Check it out." He had a whole $4,000 in his account. Then later in the day, he showed me text messages between him and his mother where he was bragging about me being fat, and his mom was like, "Get it." Like, what the heck? I noped out. He would message me constantly after that. Weird dude. Story 8. Went on a date with an outwardly normal girl. We started kissing and getting frisky back at her place, and she started meowing and acting cat-like. It was little mews at first, then leading on to her stopping and licking her fingertips. She saw me make a face and questioned why I'd made a face. I was straight up and said, "Because you're pretending to be a cat?" She said, "Oh, was I? Sometimes it takes over when I'm excited." We tried again. She mewed again, and I noped out of there pretty quickly after that. Story 9. In college, I was seeing a girl who lived in student residence with me, but on another floor. She would always talk about how another guy, Tom, on her floor, was obsessed with her and would show me texts between them. She said she only talked to him because he's harmless and that they're friends. I never met him. After a week, her ex-friend from high school pulled me aside and told me not to trust her. She said that the girl I was seeing is a notorious liar and that Tom doesn't exist. That she added her own number in her phone as Tom, would text herself and then delete the sent messages. The only reason her ex-friend knew is because she saw the text message exchange happen in the reflection of a mirror when they were in the same room. I was close to the front desk and asked if they could look up the names from that floor. They said yes and told me that there was no guy named Tom on her floor. I noped out of that real quick. Story 10. She started to set up the relationship in a way that made me her emotional punching bag, where I was to blame for any bad feelings she had. Nothing I could do or say in those moments could ever help the situation because that wasn't my purpose in her life. I was the distraction from her own issues she refused to acknowledge. Her extreme moods weren't because of her or her past, but it was because I said something the wrong way or laid on the clean sheets of the sweaty body. The ick came about when I realized that at 40 years old, that this has always been the pattern in my relationships with women, and it has everything to do with how my mom treated me. She had her own massive trauma from being horribly mistreated as a child, but used that as a shield to use me as her emotional and physical punching bag when she was in a bad mood. "You're not being mistreated, I was mistreated," was a line I heard constantly as she beat me on a regular basis. Once I saw that for what it was, it disgusted me. But it also changed how I handle relationships now, and now I'm happily married for 2 years to a wonderful woman who never does that to me. Story 11. I had 2 rounds of dating him because I really liked him. The first go-around, I brought him home with me after our second date. I definitely planned on sleeping with him, but during foreplay, he went down on me, and he was so rough, it was super unenjoyable and borderline painful. I kept telling him over and over to slow down and be more gentle, but he just didn't listen. It was like he was mimicking porn he'd watched. It totally ended the mood and my interest in him. I told him that I wasn't interested in dating someone who wouldn't listen to my needs and wants in the bedroom. Months later, he hit me up and I agreed to go out with him again. I thought maybe he had considered what I said before. I met him at a great local spot to watch a basketball game. We'd initially connected over a love of the same team. Spent a lot of time getting ready for the date. Looked nice, smelled nice. He shows up after me and the first thing I notice is that he's dressed rather carelessly. Specifically, he was wearing this old B2 zip-up hoodie, which is like, ugh, not a deal breaker. Then he sits next to me and we share a quick hug and bam, that was it. I was done. He stank. He absolutely reeked of cigarettes and his breath was awful, like he hadn't even brushed his teeth. Still had a good time with him, watching the game and eating wings and fries, but it was immediately not a romantic thing for me. It was just watching a game with a buddy. I'm still really disappointed even now because, like I said, I really liked him. He was super sweet and really liked me back. He just didn't seem mature enough to be in an actual relationship with. Bummer. Story 12. When I was in my senior year of high school, the son of one of my mom's work friends, who was my age, was into me. I wasn't as into him, but he seemed nice enough and I went on a single date with him. The reason there was no second date? He kept trying to find out if I was still pure or not. His reasoning was that if I wasn't, then it wouldn't matter if we had intimacy on the first date, and if I was, he would work for it. I didn't tell him one way or another because it was none of his darn business and his reasoning was utterly pathetic. I never spoke to him again after I called a cab and went home. Story 13. When I was 16, I awkwardly ended up third-wheeling a really embarrassing date. The dude turned up in a white suit, blue sunglasses, and a trilby. It was so jarring that I started cracking up in the car as we drove past the restaurant entrance. Who shows up to a date looking like a cross between Michael Jackson and Guy Fieri? If he was a nice dude or at least caring, then I guess I could have let that slip, but he absolutely would not stop talking about how he was the best at literally anything and everything. He talked so much that my friend and I had finished our food before I'd even started his. The guy kept insisting that he was the best in the world, a guitar hero, and kept showing us screenshots of the leaderboard. Like, we cared. I know we were only 16, but it was really embarrassing. Man, I've never felt so much secondhand embarrassment. I don't know how that guy turned out, but I'm going to stalk him on Facebook to see if he ever changed. Story 14. He turned out to be anti-feminist, anti-LGBT, and an Andrew Tate fan. Ugh, we had bonded over our mutual love for Star Wars, and this info just ended any feelings. It was so gosh darn hot, too. Like, darn, I wanted to climb him like a tree, but I cannot stand those toxic, let's revive our masculinity or inner alpha stuff. He posted, "Women are meant to breed, not lead." Made me instantly rage. He had a problem if girls offered to split the bill. He always wanted to pay. I guess some people are okay with it and find it generous, but I've always split my bills, so I let it slide a few times, but every single time he'd insist. I mean, let me pay my share, dude. I don't like freeloading. Story 15. Yeah, he wore his hat to bed. Let me be clear, not a bonnet or wave cap, a legit hat. Sometimes woven, sometimes with an actual brim. The same hat he'd been wearing all day came to bed with him. There were other things, but he never went bareheaded. He had hair, but his head was shaped like someone went really hard with a forceps to get him out when he was born. A real almond of a noggin. He also didn't tuck in dress shirts. Fine in some occasions, and tied ties like he was 5. I didn't need to dress for an office job, but I found myself wondering what it would be like if our relationship progressed and I wound up walking down the aisle to a man wearing a shirt like a dress, with a tie that hung lower than his pants, wearing a baseball cap or beanie on our wedding day. Couldn't handle it. Also, the intimacy was terrible and he was a lousy communicator. But the hat in bed, though. Story 16. The dude was in the bathroom for a while, clearly taking a dump, no big deal. Lived in a weird little apartment where the only sink was in the kitchen. He comes out and doesn't immediately go to wash his hands. I ask him about it. It starts a small argument where he then refused to wash his hands because he was going to, but then it made him feel like a child, so now he has to make a point. All attraction lost in the very second. So freaking gross. Can't believe I let poop hands touch me. I want to retch so bad. Hygiene is important, folks. The little things indicate how you go about the big things. Story 17. I dated this girl once for a short while, a month or so, and I visited her home once while her family was out of town. It was just a mess and smelled bad because she had a lot of pets. Birds, cats, a micro pig, and some very neglected dogs. The doggies were matted, smelly, and seeking love and attention. I inquired about the dogs, and she said, I don't know, they're not mine. When I said goodnight later from the car, she leaned in to kiss me, but I just didn't feel connected anymore. I called her later and asked her more about the dogs. They were her father's, and he was never around. Her sisters, and she didn't care for them. So after a couple of nights, I stole the dogs and took them to a rescue shelter. They're currently with a new loving home, and the girl's family never even flinched at the dogs not being there anymore. I broke it off a few weeks later once I knew they were blissfully ignorant of their dogs being gone. She was a sweet girl and liked me a lot with loads of affection, but I couldn't be with someone who could just ignore some innocent lives that way. Critics? Story 18. He faked seizures our entire relationship to get out of helping me with chores and cooking meals. We dated for less than a year. I found out from his friends and family that he had never had a seizure in front of them. One night, I came home after working a double, asked him to please try making dinner. I found him asleep and woke him up to let him know I was home and to ask about dinner. He said he had a seizure. This caused an argument where he admitted he faked it. He used to say seizures were caused by flashing lights. I took him to countless doctors, and no one could replicate what I saw all the time. After he admitted it finally clicked. He had been faking it the whole time. Story 19. I'd been seeing them, mostly in public. We'd met on an app, and I was still figuring out if we fit. For over a month. They were pressing for more time together, a deeper connection and exclusivity when they asked to reschedule a proposed date activity because they needed to take their daughters to the dentist that day. Kids? We'd been talking for hours on marathon dates and texting whenever we weren't together for like 7.5 weeks. What kids? You have kids? Kids are not a deal breaker? Hiding your 3 children from someone you've asked for a commitment is a massive deal breaker. Story 20. This guy I used to go to school with added and messaged me out of the blue on Facebook, asking me on a date. It was cute and nice from what I remembered, so I said yes, and we continued to casually chat back and forth in the days leading up to the date. I'd mentioned I'd just gone to make a cup of tea, and he asked me how I took my tea. And I told him he got aggressively insistent that I made a tea wrong because, and I quote, that's not the traditional British way. It just rubbed me the wrong way. A warning bell went off in my head because it was so strangely aggressive for such a trivial thing. So I told him never mind on the date. I ended up having to block him because he took the rejection about as well as he took the tea. Story 21. I knew this Mormon girl and she was always smoking hot. I had a thing for her but couldn't get past her religion. After we graduated, she went straight to college and had an awakening. She came back for summer and immediately hit me up and several of my bros to fool around. She wanted it so bad that she came over to our place and sat at our kitchen table, attempting to talk us into bed with her. On a weekday. Sober. It was weird and we said no and asked her to leave. I think I would have been into it if she was looking at just me, but the fact that she was practically wearing a sign that said open for business and not even hiding that she was trying to sleep with any of my friends who would have intimacy with her made it not my thing. Story 22. My ex-husband gained a lot of weight because he chose not to take care of himself and ate enough for 3 people each meal. That concerned me for his health. Then one night I brought home dinner and instead of sitting at the table with me, he took his food into the bedroom, lay completely flat in the bed, put his food container in his chest and ate dinner like that. It was the most disgusting thing I'd ever seen him do. His laziness was completely off the wall and he only ever made excuses about it. My feelings for him had already been wavering due to a ton of other reasons, but that was the nail in the coffin. I could never look at him the same ever again. Story 23. I met a woman on Tinder a few years back and we hit it off really well. About a week after we had met, she deleted and blocked me in all forms of social media with little to no explanation. I was texting her on my iPhone and after she sent one last text, it went from iMessage blue to regular text green. After that, I messaged her again a few hours later and heard nothing. I checked my Snapchat, Facebook, and Instagram and couldn't find her anywhere. I panicked because I thought I had genuinely connected with her, but after a day or two, I calmed down and thought, if this is some kind of test, I'm out. Forget this high school BS. So I fired up Bumble and Tinder again and matched with someone on Bumble who showed genuine interest in me and started an awesome conversation. The next morning, I got a text from the original woman and she literally said, I see you're back on Tinder. I made a fake account to see if he would get back on, and sure enough, there you are. I laughed to myself because I knew immediately I had dodged a massive bullet. I responded essentially saying, "Well, you blocked me on all social media and my number. How was I supposed to know you'd reach out?" She literally said, "It was supposed to be a test of your loyalty and you failed. I can never be with someone who would start talking to other women immediately after something so trivial." I responded saying, "All right, sounds good. Have a good one." Then blocked her myself. Oh, and the woman I began talking to on Bumble immediately after the first one blocked me, we'll be celebrating 3 years of marriage and 5 years total together this upcoming September. I went from a crazy woman to the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life. Talk about an upgrade. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 24. For some context, I'm over 40. Dating at my age is, well, after this experience, I just gave up, really. I was seeing a guy last year. We met through a mutual interest and he asked me out. We got on well and I was hopeful. What did raise some concerns was that he mentioned he'd never had a relationship last very long, so I was cautious, but things started off well enough. The first time we properly kissed, it was like he was trying to swallow my entire face. I mentioned it was a bit full on and asked him to be more gentle. It worked for a few moments, and then it was back to the face eating. Despite this, and probably stupidly, I persevered. It was generous, sweet, and into the same sorts of things as me. I guess I wanted it to work. The first time I went to his house and stayed over just ended everything. Although he owned his own place and owned business and had his stuff together financially, his house was unsettlingly juvenile. It was tidy and spotlessly clean, but it was like a bachelor pad for a 12-year-old. And after an evening, chatting, cuddling, and watching movies, we went to bed. Turns out that his kissing wasn't the only terrible thing. He also had problems keeping it firm. Absolutely 100% down to anxiety, but he would just completely zone out and totally ignore my requests to be more gentle and slow down. I eventually had to yell to finally get him to stop after gently asking him to stop, no effect. And that absolutely grossed me out. I broke up with him the next day after a sleepless night lying next to him, feeling a mix of anger, pity, and disgust. Not because of the ED problem, but the fact his ego overtook my identity as a person and I just felt like a thing he was desperate to conquer to prove something to himself. I'm still grossed out now and have had absolutely no desire to try and get intimate with anybody since then. I appreciate that it's not easy for a bloke in that position, but it messed me up too. He was shorter than me and still strong enough to pin me down. Ugh. Story 25. I don't know if this counts, but hear me out. There was a girl I dated for over a year. We were very happy, never fought, and after a while we planned on moving in together. At one point I even brought a ring and planned to propose to her. The day before I was going to propose and a week before we moved in together, she broke it off because she was worried we wanted different things in life. I was ready to settle down and have kids. She still wanted to go to the bars twice a week and didn't want to be accountable to anyone, and there's nothing wrong with that. So we broke up. Then, 48 hours later, she wanted to get back together. Still loved her, so we got back together with no plans of getting married, which is what scared her in the first place. We moved in together and things were going fine for about 1.5 months. Then we were planning to go out for dinner, and when I got home, she was crying and wanted to break up again for the same reasons. We actually continued to live together as just friends, and things were okay. One day, just the two of us went shopping together and had a blast doing it. Afterward, we went to a nice restaurant and just overall had a good night. We got home and I went to my bed. A few minutes later, she came in, got into the bed, and started kissing me and trying to have intimacy. In that moment, instant ick. 1.5 years of loving this girl, wanting to be with her and her rejecting me twice. Then suffering as just being friends in the same house. We go out and have a good evening together as just friends, and then she wanted to have intimacy. It just felt like everything was on her terms and I was being used. I just saw straight through it all in that moment, lying there in the dark room, looking at her. I had zero issues moving on after that, and she actually moved out of the house shortly after that night. Story 26. Not a serious relationship, but a casual thing. We only knew each other for about 4 months, and he pooped his pants twice in that time period. The first time I was like, okay, people get sick and things happen, and tried to let it go. But the second time, he texted me to tell me about it and said it happened as he was walking out of the bathroom. It never happened around me, but he would tell me about it and also bring it up in front of my friends. He thought it was very funny and normal for a grown man to do. He also once farted during intimacy, which I ignored because things happen, but then proceeded to bring it up after and wouldn't let the conversation go. He was proud of it. There were so many other issues with him that were red flags, but that was enough for me to nope out. Story 27. Recently, actually, I met a guy at a college event. He was very handsome, dressed well, super charismatic, and sweet. I usually don't get much attention from guys outside of a friendship, so I was starstruck. He took me on a wonderful date, straight out of a movie. For the second day, we went to his apartment he shared with his grandma. All was going well. We were kissing. It was my first kiss, and then he got on top of me and started rambling about, "This is fate. I love you. I can't hold back anymore." I instantly tried to escape, but he wouldn't let me leave, so I started crying. He finally let me leave, and then on my birthday, he texted my mom, begging me to have me back. All attraction lost. Story 28. Oh, I have one for this. I dated this girl one summer and things were going well. One day she decided to show me her tap dancing, and for some reason I just really did not like it. I told her it was cool and all and kept my true feelings to myself. She kept doing these little tap dancing routines from when she was in middle school all the time after that, and I hated it. But this is not all. The nail in the coffin was she tried telling me creamy was a flavor and not a texture. She decided to really press the issue and was adamant about this. So random, but it ended any remaining attraction I had for her. Story 29. I went on a few dates with a girl a few years back, and she would consistently make disparaging comments about homeless people and how she was scared of them. I live in New York City, and homelessness has definitely gotten more widespread in the past 5 years, but the vast majority of homeless people are just normal people who cannot afford housing. I had a friend in college who was homeless, and I've had homeless employees in the past. Her comments really just showed a basic lack of empathy. I've been on dates with multiple girls who say crappy things about homeless people, and it's an instant turn off. Story 30. I missed a call from her on my cell phone, so she called the landline at my parents' house because I was home from college on break. I'd never given her that number. She hadn't been there, met my folks, or known anyone else that would have been able to give her that number either. I hadn't even told her I'd gone back to my hometown and she lived a few hours away. I didn't answer the phone because I recognized her number on the caller ID and was dumbfounded. She called 5 more times, back to back. I answered none of them and broke things off completely shortly thereafter. Story 31. I started talking to a girl off a dating site. Things were going pretty well, despite the fact that she insisted on using WhatsApp because that's the platform her friends used. And one day while I was at work, she messaged me, but I wasn't able to respond because I was working. 10 minutes later, she tried again, then by text, then by DMing me through the dating site, all within 15 minutes. She even started asking if I was ignoring her. When I got home and saw the messages and timeline, I was pretty put off, so I told her, "Hey, sorry I was at work and couldn't reply. That bomb of messages in such a short span of multiple platforms is a little bit of a concern and set off a couple red flags for me." At which point she called me a schmuck and blocked me. No losses there. Sorry to whichever person ends up with that crazy woman. Story 32. I saw her in Saneside when we went out drinking together for the first time. She didn't like that I talked to another girl while waiting in the line to get to a club. She spent the whole night ignoring me while trying to make me jealous by dancing with other people. She refused to talk to me most of the night and ran away like a child whenever I tried to talk to her. She insulted me whenever she did talk. She was also having periodic crying fits. This behavior could be chalked up to alcohol, but by the morning I was completely done. No more feelings. Story 33. I met her for the first time at a cafe. She brought her best friend along, which is fine, and from a safety standpoint, not a bad idea when meeting someone for the first time. Anyway, this thing was most likely rehearsed beforehand, and they probably saw it played out on TV or in a movie sometime. My date excused herself to go to the bathroom. Now, typically, that's where women go to the bathroom as at least a pair. From my understanding, it's the custom for chatting or whatnot, but not this time. My date went alone, and the best friend stayed. The best friend leans in and says, "If you hurt her, I will hunt you down," or something to that effect. Now I sort of get the intent of it, and I've seen this before on TV. It's supposed to be kind of this funny little moment, but her delivery was off, and it was super serious and creepy. I got the ick, and I knew that I wasn't going to come back from it. When the day came back, I put some money on the table, shook her hand, and wished her luck, and left. I didn't really feel it was necessary to explain as they probably could figure it all out, and by then, I was over it. Story 34. Oh god. As an actively looking single woman, I have a bunch of these. These are all different guys from POF. Spent a couple of weeks chatting with a cute and cool dude I really wanted to meet. He described himself as living in an old house with several pets. I got there to discover the old house was a tiny, decrepit trailer that was new in the LBJ administration, and the several pets was 10 dogs, and I don't know how many cats were in it. I could smell the stench from the yard, you guys. I did a 180 and left without a word. Who the heck thinks it's a good idea to invite potential partners over to your animal horde trailer that stinks so bad you can smell it outside? I chatted with the guy over text for a couple of days, then he says, "Let's talk on the phone." Okay. His voice, mannerisms, and the way of speaking sounded exactly like my very cruel ex from 30 years ago. He even used some of the same phrases. It gave me the creeps, big time. I hadn't talked to him again after that, and I imagine he probably wasn't happy. He texted me like 20 times for a couple of days after. "I'm sorry, Hank, I just can't have a mini PTSD flashback every time I hear you speak." I texted and video chatted with a really gorgeous guy. Clicked really well, and there was some serious flirting going on. I was really into him. I was like, crap, this is gonna happen. I met him in person. Things were going well until he kissed me. Terrible. He said some weird things and it was kind of a rough touch. I made an excuse and bounced before I went any further. I talked to a guy who at first I thought was a scammer, but since he claimed to live in my tiny town, I actually went to meet up with him. Holy crap, he's real. And holy crap, he's intoxicated and smells like dog crap. I often caress that delete account button on POF and think about how many cats I can realistically afford to care for, rather than spend money and time trying to find a boyfriend. Story 35. Within a conversation, I briefly mentioned that I viewed their family as very well off, to which they jumped back and scoffed, saying, "Me? Well off? We're poor." I realized that I guess I shouldn't have assumed and said, "Oh, I mean, I kind of just assumed because, you guys got 2 houses, what, like 6 cars? And I mean, in the last few months, you guys went to Japan and Austria for family vacations." They said, "Well, yeah, but like my friends, most of them have 4 houses. So-and-so has a house here in town, a lake house, a beach house, and an apartment in New York City." I was fully expecting them to say it was because they were actually bankrupt or their parents recently got laid off and they were struggling or something along those lines. But no, they just had zero sense of reality and were extremely sheltered. Immediate nope from me. Signed, someone who grew up below the poverty line. Story 36. I went on a date with a guy that was pretty nice and we were having a good time and connecting. We saw a movie and then decided to get dinner after at some fast food type place. When we got up to the cashier, he turned around and said to me in a bitter, awkward tone, "Women have feminism now and want to be equal to men, so I think it's fair you pay for your own food." Couldn't figure out why I ghosted him afterwards and made a bunch of Facebook posts about how no woman wanted to be with him. Like, he could have asked me to cover my own food without going into a weird feminism rant. Story 37. We both dislike texting, and since we live near each other, we usually bump into each other in person and don't need to text. We had a date planned, and that ended up not being able to make, which is fine. Life happens. I figured we'd reschedule next time we see each other. Problem is, we both work a lot and didn't see each other for about a week and a half. Screw it, we have the technology. I texted her to reschedule. No reply. A couple days later, we finally bumped into each other and she said she thought it was gross that I texted her. As best I can tell, my texting her gave her the ick, and the fact that she got the ick from something so innocuous gave me the ick. Ultimately, it probably saved us both some time. Story 38. Many years ago, I went out on a date with a woman I met in college. She was incredibly attractive and I was very interested in her. So we went out on a date, had a nice evening planned, a movie and dinner at a nice, and to me, extremely expensive restaurant. I picked her up at home and we headed out. It was a fairly long drive to where we were going, maybe 45 minutes. The whole time, all she talked about was old boyfriends, what kind of cars they drove, how much money they made, etc. Everything was about appearance and wealth. She was born to a rich family, drove a really nice car, and had never had a job. I was from a poor family and barely had 2 nickels to rub together. After about a half an hour, I had had it. I got off the freeway, turned left at the end of the off-ramp, crossed over the freeway, and got back and going back the way we came. She asked what the heck was up. I told her something like, "This isn't going to work. All you care about is money and how things look. I don't care about any of that stuff. We're just not tethered to the same world. Let's just both of us pretend like none of this ever happened." She cried all the way home. It didn't bother me a bit. A couple of years later, I met the woman I eventually married. I hit the jackpot that day. Story 39. I went to a guy's house for dinner once. It was a hoarder's paradise. He vacuumed and cleaned before I came over. Only the trails between the piles of stuff, maybe. There were 9 dogs inside. I lost count of how many were outside, and there was no back door in his house. Everything was covered in dirt. There were no windows at all. The toilet didn't flush. It seemed the only running water in the house was the bathtub. Maybe the washer on the front porch had water. Didn't check there. Dinner was served in the dining area. There was no kitchen in the house, and the dining room table was stacked so high with junk I couldn't see him sitting across from me. I balanced my plate in my lap, dropping bites of food onto the floor where the dogs ate it because I was afraid to eat it, wondering where it was cooked. Did he wash his hands for this plate? Too many things. I left immediately after and never returned. It was like 20 years ago. Smells are still in my nose. Story 40. I talked for a while on Tinder and had our first date at a museum. When I first saw her, I didn't even think it was her and nearly walked past her. It was weird because I don't think she manipulated any of her photos, but her face definitely looked far different in them. She'd also sent intimate pictures before that, but they never showed her face. She wasn't super ugly, but it was startling not seeing what I expected, and I got turned off almost immediately. However, I tried rationalizing it and told myself we had a good time chatting, so I went through the date and it went well. However, the real thing that ended it was when I went into her apartment. It immediately smelled like crap. Really bad. Immediately to the left of the door was a puppy pad with a mess all over it. Then I looked at the carpet in the living area and it was just one giant stain. She had a cat and a blind dog, both of which used the bathroom wherever and were also both total schmucks, even to her. At the time, we were only stopping by her place for 1 minute before doing something else. I knew immediately that I wasn't going to continue a relationship with her, but I didn't really want her to think it was because of that. She was a veterinarian and also tended to be a virtue signaler. I knew if I called her out on it, she would try to turn it around on me and try to guilt trip me for not liking her because she sees herself as virtuous for taking care of a poor blind dog. Eventually, I broke things off that day and never gave her reasons. She even messaged me a week later, pleading for a reason, but there was no way I was going to admit that I thought she was absolutely disgusting. Story 41. I was dating a guy for a few months. Very handsome and charming. At one point, I had a couple of friends over, a few of whom were also trans like myself. The topic of wrestling came up. It turns out one of my friends also wrestled in high school back when she presented as male. My boyfriend was elated. He also wrestled and wanted to challenge her to a wrestling match. I was all for it and thought it was a fun idea. I'd seen him be quite competitive in the past, so a little friendly competition was nothing new coming from him. Within seconds, she absolutely wrecked him, to which he decided to have a little outburst, an absolute tantrum. He did this weird scream or growl hybrid thing, then kicked the closest object to him before leaving to cool off. I had never felt so much secondhand embarrassment in my life. It was truly like watching the antisocial kid transform into a wolf during a confrontation. Full-blown ick. Story 42. I had been seeing a girl for a few weeks and was away on a business trip. One night, at about 2 a.m. my time, I got a call from her. She was panicking, saying her roommate and she got into a fight and she needed a place to stay. Such a silly reason to get into a fight, too. She proceeded to tell me she was parked in front of my house and I needed to let her in, fully knowing that I was out of town. She begged me for my garage code or if I had a hidden key so that she could get in. I feel like she probably looked for one before calling me. She had only been to my house once before and it was so early in the relationship I had zero trust for her. No, you may not stay in my house without me there. I said to her, "You're almost 30. You can handle this. Get a hotel or call a friend who's home." Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.